what's one memorable experience you've had with your father? Can you think of something that you can recall? This is the moment. This is a memorable experience I've had with my father. So it can be a moment of joy. It could be a travel outside Singapore, outside the country. It's an adventure. It could be a lesson learned. It could also be a painful past, diba? So sometimes we get hurt by our own parents. So these are the things that we can recall and remember as part of our experience with our father. So for myself, when I was in high school, during the school holiday, this is one of my favorite part of being in high school. Every time a school holiday, my father would bring me along to his work. Okay? So my father is an electrician, and he would bring me along to his work, and he will leave me to one of his electrician, right? And I'm not doing anything fancy because of the safety, because my father don't allow me to touch anything that is live wire because he's worried about me. And so what I would do is I will just hand tools to the electrician and basically just learn and observe. And I've been doing that for the rest of the school holiday. And one of the best part of doing that gig, every Friday or Saturday, I will receive a salary. That's the best part. That's the thing that I've been waiting for every week. So my father would give me 120 pesos per day. That's my salary at the time. Sounds a lot, no? 120 pesos. But if you convert it into Singapore money now, it's almost $4. So can you imagine that? Almost $4 for a day's wage of work. My son was doing a part-time here. He's getting $11 per hour, not per day. So that excites me because I receive a salary at the end of the week, and I use that money to buy things, to buy clothes, to buy food, to hang out with friends, to watch movie. And every time I remember that gig with my father, I can't help but to have a sense of excitement, sense of accomplishment every time I remember that project that we did, because I was part of the team that put lights into that building. I was part of the team that runs cables to make the telephone lines work. And that's one of the many memorable experiences I had with my father. And I'm sure every one of us can tell their own story about the memorable experience we've had with our father. So why I am saying that? Because what we're going to discuss today is about a father and a two sons. It's a perfect time for us to reflect that kind of father that Jesus shares in this parable. A father who is prodigal in love, rich in grace, and unlike any other. That's why I put a title in our conversation this afternoon as A Father Like No Other. Right? So I hope our children will call us, "This is my father like no other." If not, we have a God, a father who likes no other. So this will be in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 to 32. And if there's one thing that I'd like all of us to bring home this afternoon is this: the true fatherhood reflects the heart of God. So when we say true fatherhood reflects the heart of God, we're not just talking about dads here. We're talking to anyone who wants to reflect the love of God to anyone, who wants to love like Him, who wants to forgive like Him, who wants to welcome others like Him. So, brothers and sisters, whether you are a father or a mother or a son or a daughter, that you are here this afternoon, we are all called to reflect the heart of the Father. So it started when Jesus was telling this parable in Luke 15, it started with this. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." The Pharisees and the teachers of the law were complaining about Jesus because He's hanging out with the tax collectors and the people they labeled as sinners. Because during that time, the Pharisees were very strict about their ritual purity and moral separation. So for them, Eating with sinners, hanging out with the tax collectors is a sign that you are approving what they are doing. And this prompted Jesus to tell this parable. It started with the parable of the lost sheep, parable of the lost coin, and now the parable that we are going to discuss this afternoon is the parable of the lost son. And Jesus used this parable to correct the misconceptions about the character of God. That God is not distant, but a Father who values the lost and welcomes them home with joy. So let's start with this. And then Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. If you are the father, having this kind of son who is asking you to give me my share of the estate, it's like asking you, Father, can you give me your share of your CPF, your HDB, whatever estate that you have, your bank savings. So this guy is not just asking his allowance, he's not just asking for money, asking an inheritance. And when Jesus was saying this to the Pharisees and to the Jewish listener, this is culturally shocking because as if he is telling the dad, as if he was telling the dad that you're dead. During the time in their culture, and even in our culture today, you only get inheritance when someone is dead, right? So same thing in the Jewish culture. And the firstborn would get a double portion. So if the father has 3 houses, the older brother, or the oldest, the firstborn would get 2 houses, and the younger one would get 1 house. So this request, if you are sitting there and listening to Jesus, this is highly irregular, and this is very disrespectful to the father. So if you are the father here, what would you do? What would you feel? Some of us probably will be angry, will be disappointed with that kind of questioning. Or probably you will kick your son out of the house because of the disrespect that he is showing you. And let's see what the father did. The father divided his property between them. So let's just pause for a while on this. Let's unpack this statement that the father divided this property, because this is not just a financial transaction. Because in the Jewish culture, land is more than just a property. Land is more than just a property. It tied to their identity and to their legacy. Because each family's land was part of the tribal inheritance given to them by God when they entered the promised land. So it was their marker, it was their identity in the community. So when the father divided this property, he is not just giving away money. He is tearing apart a piece of his life. If you look at what the son did, not long after that, the son got together all he had. Not long after that. So he was in a hurry to leave his family. He was in a hurry to leave the place. He didn't even think twice. He didn't even consider what kind of effect this request is doing for the whole family. So not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, all the money, and probably, the father had to sell all the properties that he had to divide and give it to his younger son. And what he did is he set off for a distant country and there squandered his wealth in wild living. He set off for a distant country. He didn't just move to another block or to another city or to another town. He set off for a distant country. That means he wanted to be as far, far away from his father's presence. As if he was saying, I don't want to do anything with you anymore. I don't want to be associated with you anymore. Part of the Jewish culture is staying in the land means staying connected in the faith, in the community, and in the family. So when the younger son set off for a distant country, for another country, he is really cutting off. He wanted to cut off any relationship he has left to his father and to his family. So when you are a dad like this, that the younger son took everything, right? He's part of your wealth, and he left. What would you feel as a dad? It's heartbreaking, diba? When you see your son walking away, You don't know whether your son will come back again. You don't know when he will return or whether he will return, right? You know, sometimes when I travel for work, I will leave my family back home, and I have a feeling of heaviness in my heart every time I would leave, because I know I'm leaving them. You know, I'm concerned about their safety. I'm concerned about their whether they will survive. I know they will survive, but you know, it's just a feeling of heaviness, right? Because of this separation from your family, you will miss them. And this guy who left and set off for a distant country, the father would think, whether will I see him back again? And he said, after he had spent everything with all the money that the younger son had in another country, he spent everything. So he lived like a one-day millionaire. And he said there was a famine in that whole country. And sometimes this is in our life, it happened like this, right? Sometimes when we think we are in control, situations, circumstances reminds us that we are not totally in control. That's why they are saying that easy come, easy go. So he did not invest the money, he spent everything, and Jesus described it in here that he spent everything, and there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. How many of us here have experienced this kind of situation in their lives that nothing is left, right? And there was a severe famine, not just in the town, not just in the city, but in the whole country. So if there's a lack of food in the town where he is at, there will also lack of food in the whole country. So he has nowhere to go. Now he's not just out of money, but he is out of option. And sometimes when you are in desperate situation like this, you will do things you never imagined doing. And the next verse he said, so he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. You know, from the comfort of his father's house to feeding pigs in the foreign land. And this is how far he had been. You know, out of desperation, he hired himself out of the citizen of that country. He applied for work. You know, from being someone who has a servant in his father's house, from being someone who used to be served, and right now, he has to work for other people. And Jesus described him here that his employer sent him to his fields to feed pigs. You know, if you have a Jewish audience and Jesus was saying this, that he was feeding pigs, this is because in the Jewish culture, pig is unclean animals. Right? So for Jewish culture, his situation now is really rock bottom. Because pigs were considered unclean animals, and feeding pigs is not just dirty, but it was shameful and a disgrace. So what the younger man is experiencing right now is not just poverty, but really humiliation. And no Jew in his right mind would do this unless he is out of options. So his situation really is spiraling down. And in verse 16, he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating. How many of us here have experienced running out of money? Ako lang. Oh, marami tayo. Yeah. But I'm sure we never really long to eat food for the pigs. Right? I don't think any one of us have longed to eat food for the pigs. Even we have run out of money. But this guy, because no one is helping him, no one gave him anything. Can you imagine with all the friends that he had when he had a lot of money? I think all of them ran away. He left them. They left probably because he don't have any more money. Some of our friends do that, right? When we have a lot of money, we have a lot of friends. When we don't have money, we no longer see them around, right? So he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating. This is difficult and this is tough. And you know, one day I was doing my laundry because every week I will go to the laundry shop to do the laundry of our clothes for those clothing that we cannot put in the washing machine. We will send them to the laundry shop just across across the road. So one time I was putting my clothing there in the washing machine, and someone approached me. And this guy is a young man, same age as my son. He asked me, "Can you give me money?" So I was a little bit taken aback because I'm not expecting someone to ask me for money. So I started to interview him. "What happened to you? Right? Where's your parents? Where do you live?" "Oh, I live there, and my parents kicked me out of the house. And I have not eaten for 2 days." And that experience, actually, I was halfway studying this. I can relate this to, so my heart was a bit touched on that situation. And I asked him, "Why don't you go to an MP so that they can help you to find your shelter, to give you food temporarily?" And he said, "Where's the MP?" Okay, so then while waiting, I started to search for my wallet, ready to give him money. He's asking just for $20. Okay, but I realized I didn't bring my wallet. Okay, so I said, "I'm sorry, I forgot my wallet. I don't have cash right now." And I was surprised when he said, "Can you do pay now?" So he took out his cell phone. And I have my cell phone with me, and I'm comparing my cell phone to his cell phone. His cell phone is better than me. I started to doubt whether his intention is real. So I said, "I cannot transfer you money. Why don't we go to the hawker center next door, and I will buy you food?" And he said, "No, I need cash because I want to select my own food." And he said, "No, we will go there. You select your own food, and I will pay for it." And then he just walked away. Right? So going back to the story, even if it is true that, his parents kicked him out and he had not been eaten for 2 days, and that's difficult situation. And you have this uncle doing his laundry, not willing to give you money, it's really difficult situation. And I can relate this to the situation of the younger man here. And that is what sin and foolish choices can do in our lives. And I remember one author says that sin will take you further than you plan to go and cost you more than anything you are willing to pay for. This is how deceptive and destructive the nature of sin is. The younger son didn't thought that he will end up in this kind of situation. I don't think the younger son thought that when he asked for his inheritance from his father, that when he left his hometown and set out for the other country, I don't think he envisioned himself that he will be in this kind of situation, that he will be working for someone else, that he will be begging for food, that he will be desiring to eat food meant for the pigs. Because sin always promises more than it delivers, and it always costs more than we expect. Because sin often appears attractive in the beginning. It will offer you fulfillment, it will offer you freedom and pleasure, like the younger son who was drawn to what seems a better life away from his father. And in a Jewish culture, at this juncture, what the younger son is experiencing is an utter degradation of his situation. And this is the lowest point in this story. But sometimes when you are in the lowest point of your life, lowest point, you are in the situation where you know where to go, dito tayo napapaisip, di ba? We started to think, we started to reflect, and this is what happened now to the younger son. And he said, when he came to his senses, I like the word here, when he came to his senses. He says, this is the moment that the heart starts to remember what kind of life I had before with my father. He said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving? He not only came to his senses, but he came to the truth. And the truth is, yes, that's correct. In my father's house, he started to remember his father. In my father's house, even the servants have more than enough food to eat. And here I am. I'm starving to death. Sometimes the Lord allows us to hit rock bottom not to destroy us, but to wake us up. So I'm not saying that God causes suffering or orchestrates failure in us, but He allows people to experience the consequences of our choices. Not to wreck us, not to destroy us, but to wake us up and bring us to repentance and hopefully lead us to restoration. Just like Jonah, when God asked Jonah to go to Nineveh, go to another country, what did Jonah do? He diverted himself and went out to plan to go to another city, but he ended up in the belly of the fish. Just like David. David was at his lowliest point in his life after his sin with Bathsheba. What happened to him? He lost his son. You know, when he came to his senses and he said, "Here I am, starving to death," and he starts to remember his father and what home felt like. Because even the lowest worker in his father's house is better off than he is now. And I believe this is the turning point. This is the moment when the heart is telling him, "I want to go home." And the next verse said, "I will set out." And this is, so when the heart says to you that I want to go home, then he planned his homecoming. He said, "I will set out and go back to my father and say to him." And this is the script that he wanted to say to his father when he meet his father. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." And this is the beginning of a true repentance, recognizing that our sin is not just against people, but against God. And if you look at this statement coming from the younger son, that I am no longer worthy to be called your son, you can sense the humility in him. He's planning to go back to his father's house, not with a sense of entitlement, right? He wants to go back to his father's house, not as a son, but at least a servant. Because a servant in his father's house have food to eat, better than his situation right now. And this is the story that takes really a beautiful turn. The next verse says, he got up and went to his father. You know, when Jesus was telling this story, he didn't elaborate and he didn't give a details of how far from where the younger son is to his father, how long it will take him to go back to his father. Is it a few hours of walk? Is it a few days of walk, or is it a few weeks of journey? Can you imagine the weight of every step that he is making? The uncertainty, the fear of rejection, the shame of failure, because he left the house proud and is coming back here with nothing. You know, probably there are many questions that is running through his mind right now as he make his journey to his father's house. Will my father even look at me? Will I be turned away? And what if I'm not welcome anymore? And because of his situation, despite of all this uncertainty, despite all these questions, he still continued. And this is a very beautiful moment in this story. This is really heartbreaking. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. So I believe the father here has been waiting for him, has been longing for his return. I believe that the father, from the time that the younger son left his place, every day he's been longing that his son would come back in his presence. Probably every day he will, with a cup of coffee, he will look at the horizon and see whether, is my son coming back? And this is the day. This is the day that he saw his son coming back. And he still recognized him. Despite of probably the worn out clothes, long hair, dirtiness all over his body, he still recognized him. When his father saw him, he was filled with compassion. One writer described that the compassion that the father felt at the time was a deep gut level kind of emotion. It is not just feeling sorry because he saw the son, sorry for the wrong choices that you made, and this is what you get This is not just feeling sorry for someone, but this is an overwhelming movement of love that compels someone to act. So the father acted. What did the father do? He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. So can you imagine the look of this younger son? Dirty, smelly, stinky, right? But the father ran to him, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. After all the things that the son did, right? The father decided to run. And this is sometimes that we think that we are not acceptable to God for all the things that we have did. But look at this story. Jesus was telling us, Jesus was sharing to us the heart of God through the Father in this parable. And you know why? One of the reason that the Father went to his son is because part of the Jewish culture, if you have squandered wealth for the Gentiles, you will be subjected to this kezaza. So this is an ancient Jewish ceremony of public shaming and rejection. So this is a practice when a Jewish person or a son lost their inheritance among the Gentiles. And this is why the father wanted him to protect him from whatever things that the community might do around him. And also part of the Jewish culture is father don't want, because when the father won, the robe will be lifted up and the knees of the father, the legs of the father will get exposed. And that is parang kahihiyan siya during that time. So Jesus was telling us that the father here endure or di baling mapahiya siya just to protect his son. To interpret the shame and this son could receive from the community. And this is how this father showed his love to his younger son. And this is also how a good father shows his love to each and every one of us. In Romans chapter 5, verses 6 to 7, you see at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. And very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates His own love for us in this. While we were still stinky, while we were still smelly, while we're still sinners, Christ died for us. So brothers and sisters, if you're here this afternoon and if you decide in your heart, just like the younger son, enough of playing with God, enough of living a life of sin, enough of living away from my Father, and that you are making a decision that I will be going back to my Father, you know what God will do? He will also want to meet you. Not to blame you, not to put judgment on you, but to restore you. And that is how a good father is. So let's continue with the story. The son said to him, Father, and this is the thing that the younger son has been practicing. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. So when he saw his father, there's no excuses that has been given, no justification. He owned his mistake. He confessed of what he did. And he said, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And this is a voice of shame, of someone who knows of what they have done, of someone who believes that they have lost their place in the family. Can you imagine the moments that the father and the son has been having right now? You know, something is missing here because when the son was practicing, he said that at least my father could take me as one of his hired servants. But before the son could utter that, the father interrupted him. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals and on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. I like this father because he didn't ask his son, where's all my money? Anong ginawa mo sa kayamanan na binigay ko sa'yo? Where's all my money? What happened? Before the son could finish speaking, could finish his speech, he interrupted him and called his servant to bring the best robe. And the best robe is reserved for the father, right? And this shows how the father wants to restore the honor and dignity for his son. And he called his servants to put the ring on his finger, to also restore his identity and trust, saying to his son that you belong to this family. And he also asked his servant, put sandals on his feet. Because the son just wanted to be a servant in his father's household. But the father said, no. Put the sandals on his feet, because the servant don't wear anything on his feet. And this is one way of saying to his sons that you belong to this family. You will coming back not as a servant, but as my son. And killed the fattened calf. Ito yung pinatabang tupa. The fattened calf is reserved for a very special occasion. And for this father, this is a special occasion. The return of his son. So the father did not just welcome him, but forgive him. He removed the shame and restored his identity. Really, a father like no other. And he said, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. And look how Jesus uses this father in the story to mirror the heart of God, that he will never abandon his own. He did not call him servant or my rebellious son. He called him this son of mine. And this moment that when the father and the son was kind of hugging, this is more than a reunion. This is more than a reunion between a father and a son. It is a revelation that the true fatherhood reflects the heart of God. In every gesture that the father did, the robe, the ring, the sandals on his feet, we see a picture of God's extravagant grace and relentless love. It looks like the story ends here, right? But we forgot that the father had two sons, and we're talking about the younger son. So now let's talk about the other son, the older son. And he said, meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard the music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked what was going on. This is older brother. He is the faithful one, the hardworking, always in the house, always in the field. And probably after a long day's work or a few days' work in the field, he's coming back to their house, and he noticed something is different. There's a glaring light, there's a sound, there's a music, there's a dancing, and he's confused. So he called one of his servants and asked what is going on in there, because most likely he's not aware of the party that the father has scheduled on that time. And in that moment, when he asked his servant what was going on, the servant tell him something that really shakes him. The servant said, your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. Do you think that his reaction when he heard this, your brother has come, do you think he has the similar reaction as his father? Excited, finally my younger brother is here. Finally my younger brother is back in the house. It's totally the opposite. Instead of becoming excited, it's becoming thankful. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. When you have a party and you have a kid, young kids, right? And you have these kids na nagtatampo, doesn't want to join the party, right? He started to create a scene in that in your property. So the father went out and pleaded with him. The father probably busy entertaining guests. Pinagmamalaki niya. He was saying, oh, my son has come back, my younger son has come back. While the father is busy entertaining guests, eating, drinking, and he got aware that his older son doesn't want to join the party, doesn't want to join the celebration, and was angry outside, he left everything inside the house and stepped out to reach to the son who feels that he's been forgotten by his father. And the father went out and pleaded with him, trying to convince him, your younger son is already here. Why don't you join us and join in the celebration? And instead of coming inside the house, instead of softening his voice, instead of calming him down, and this is how he answered, look, probably with a finger pointing into his father's face, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. You know, apparently, the older son is looking at himself as a slave in the house because he said, I've been slaving for you. And in Jewish context, slaving means is to serve as a slave. And you know, as a slave, you don't have freedom. You don't have rights. You do as you're told. And apparently, this is how the older son is looking at himself. I'm a slave in this house. And Jesus used this word slaving to describe the older son's feelings. And this brings back memories for the Jewish back in Egypt. Remember when the Jewish people, when the Israelites were back in Egypt, they were oppressed. They were treated not as a human. So when the older son was saying this feeling, was talking to his father that I've been slaving for you. So he was telling his father, he was looking at his father as not as his father, but as his oppressor. Okay, can you get it? Right, as his oppressor. And he's looking at himself as a slave in that household. So he said, when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes come home, you kill the fattened calf for him. The older son was telling him, this is unfair. There is injustice here. So when Jesus was talking to the Pharisees and when Jesus was saying this is a kind of a soft rebuke to the Pharisees, because the Pharisees who stayed in the house, who are very close to the law of Moses, who followed the rules to the dot, but when grace is extended to the undeserving, to the tax collectors, to the people they labeled as sinners, they became angry and refused to join the celebration. And maybe we felt the same way too, one way or another, right? That when someone we see not deserving and receive that kind of grace, we harbor this kind of feeling, this is unfair or there is an injustice here. But look at how the father in this story responded. He said, my son. The father said, you are always with me and everything I have is yours. So you look at how Jesus described, uncovered the heart of the father in this story, because the father did not say or did not rebuke the older son, how dare you speak to me like that? And the father did not judge the older son as being selfish, right? He's being selfish. Instead, he reaffirmed his son that you are always with me. And he called his son, to remind him, you are not a slave here. You are not my servant. You are my son. And everything I have is yours. So this is the moment where we see the heart of this father, not just to the lost, but also to the proud, just like the older brother. And the father continued, but we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So the father is continued to convince him, continued to talk to him, pleading him, hoping that he can join the celebration. But unfortunately, this is the end of the story. You know, we did not see the response of the older brother, whether the older brother also came to his senses and decided to join the celebration. But looking at the story, looking at the heart of the father, I believe he would continue to do something. He would continue to wait. He would continue to hope that until his son would come to his senses and return to his father's love. True fatherhood reflects the heart of the father. After all the rebellion, the return, the resentment, the restoration, Jesus leaves us with a picture of a father who never gave up, who never stopped loving, who never withheld grace. And this is not just a story of a family. It is a revelation of God's heart. And that's how beautifully Jesus uncovered the heart of God through this Father. So my challenge to each and every one of us, brothers and sisters, is to reflect the heart of God as our way of life. Do not just admire the Father in the story. Imitate Him. Let His heart become our heart, and let His love become our way of life. In our home, in our offices, in our friendship, and inside the church. Be the one who forgives quickly. Be the one who restores gently, just like the Father. And be the one who celebrates loudly, just like this Father. And it all starts with us, brothers and sisters.